For the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you 3 brief stories. But before I do, I have a job for you. All you have to do is not think of a pink bunny rabbit. That's all you have to do. Just do not think of a pink bunny rabbit. My very first story is about avoidance. When I was 7 years old, me and 30 other girls on my dance team went home after practice, went to bed, and woke up with a stomach flu. Now, this was the first time in my life that I had thrown up, and it was miserable. My mom still jokes that she's never seen someone talk and throw up so much at the same time, because in between heaves, I would say, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. But after 3 days, the heaving stopped, and I got better. And a week later, we went to go get ice cream, and as I watched the customer in front of me order his gummy bear and vanilla ice cream, my stomach turned. A ball formed in my throat and my guts tied in a knot. My hands felt like they were on fire and my fingers tingled. In a moment of pure adrenaline, I looked at my mom and I said, I think I'm going to be sick. And so she threw me in the back of the car and we raced home. And as soon as we got to the garage, I took off and sprinted towards the bathroom and stuck my head in the toilet and I waited. And I hyperventilated and I waited. And I cried, and I waited, and 45 minutes passed, and I still hadn't spoke because every time I opened my mouth, it felt like an invitation to gag, and I just couldn't let that happen. So I just sat there, and I waited. And after about an hour and a half, I thought, maybe I won't actually get sick. You see, this was my very first panic attack, of which I would continue to have once, if not twice a day, for the next 4 months. I developed something called emetophobia, the intense and irrational fear of throwing up. I hated throwing up. I hated it so much that I would do anything in my power to avoid it. So I stopped eating. In my 7-year-old brain, if I didn't have any food in my stomach, then I had nothing to throw up. But the hungrier I got, the more nauseous I felt, and the less likely I was to eat anything at all. It was a vicious cycle that left me 45 pounds lighter in 6 weeks. And so after my parents noticed this disordered eating, they immediately put me into therapy, and thank goodness that they did, because I learned that avoiding food was clearly not helping, and I learned to rationalize my fear. And after months and months of therapy, I got better. Now, have you thought of the pink bunny rabbit yet? Really this time, just do not think of a pink bunny rabbit. My second story is about denial. I continued to be good for quite some time. I put on a healthy amount of weight and I made a lot of friends. I was doing so well that when an old neighbor of mine who had just recently moved out of Ohio asked me to come visit, my parents agreed. But we didn't know that my friend's parents were in a toxic, borderline abusive relationship, and we didn't know that extreme homesickness and a somewhat traumatic experience would tailspin me into another battle with my phobia. And my months of therapy couldn't have prepared me for this because this time it was different. This time I developed something called an obsessive-compulsive disorder. My obsession was throwing up, and my compulsion was to do everything in counts of 7. And I really don't know where I learned that 6 was the devil's number and 7 was God's. But I thought that if I did everything right according to this mathematical and quite frankly anal God, that he would protect me from my greatest fear. And so every time I crossed a T on my homework, I did it 7 times. And every time I dotted an I on my homework, I did it 7 times. And every time I got out of bed or put up my hair or washed my face, washed my hands, touched my desk, stubbed my toe, I did it 7 times. And it was all in this hope that I could deny the possibility that I may be sick in the future, which is why my greatest compulsion was to tell myself, you won't be sick 7 times in a row. Well, I lost a lot of friends this way because not a lot of 5th graders want to be buddies with the girl who taps every desk on her way to lunch and talks to herself. And I scared the hell out of my parents, so I went back to therapy a 2nd time. And I am so grateful because I learned that I probably couldn't deny the possibility that I would be sick in the future, and I learned to cope with my fear, and eventually, after months and months and months of work, the tapping stopped. All right, final time. Do not think of a pink bunny rabbit, okay? Just do not think of a pink bunny rabbit. My third and final story is about isolation. I consider the next period of my life to be somewhat of a remission period. I thought it was behind me. I blamed my emetophobia on immaturity and misunderstanding. But when my grandmother passed away unexpectedly, it threw me for a lot of emotions I wasn't equipped to handle. You see, my grandmother was the woman who I identified with most. My grandmother was the woman who actually passed down mental health issues. She was a classic agoraphobe, afraid of grocery stores and big crowds, and the disease actually took her life when she was no longer stable enough to digest food properly, and her heart stopped when her weight fell below 100 pounds. And so in my emotionally weakened state, my emetophobia came back, and I mean stronger than ever. I remember standing at the top of my bedroom steps crying for my parents, too afraid to come downstairs and throw up on the floor. I remember the spot in the back of the nurse's office where I would go and hide when the classroom just felt too scary. I remember running out of dance practices because if I was going to be sick, I needed to do it on my own terms and in my own room. And I remember having to go on half days at school, and I remember having to quit my dance team. I also remember being almost 16 at this time thinking, this is a bit ridiculous. I probably shouldn't be sleeping in my parents' bed. I wanted freedom from this disease, but until I could feel safe, I wanted isolation. And so I voluntarily put myself back in therapy this time. And the very first thing I asked my therapist when I got there was, why am I so afraid of this stupid fear? And she looked up from her pad of paper and looked me in the eyes and said, you'll never know. So stop asking. Stop wasting your energy trying to understand it and start putting it towards learning how to deal with it. And a light bulb went off in my head because I realized everyone I knew was putting their energy into the wrong things. How many times have you told yourself just to get over it? How many times have you tried to mute the negative voices in your mind? How many times have you tried to avoid the uncomfortable conversations, and when all that fails and you're still left feeling nervous and anxious and weird, you're thinking, why isn't this working? I'm trying everything. Well, I'll tell you why. Imagine your fear is that pink bunny rabbit. Every time I told you not to think about it, I know you did. And every time you tried to avoid, deny, or isolate yourself from your fear, you were only thinking about it more, feeding it more, and fearing it more. I reject the title of this event, Do Not Doubt, because I just don't think that's possible. It's impossible to get rid of your fears. It's impossible to get rid of your anxiety. And the pressure that we put on ourselves to do so is only making it worse. So stop putting your energy into the wrong things. Stop trying to not think of your pink bunny rabbit and start learning how to deal with whatever it represents. Even if it means accepting your fear of public speaking and the fact that you may throw up on stage and learning the skills to come out here and do it anyways, absolutely terrified. So I want to know, what would it look like for you to do and doubt at the same time? Thank you.